Specialty modern knowledge can be very, very helpful when looking at historical things, but it can also.
I promise I'm not trying to stitch everything from Variata's account, but his channel is really, really good. His content's great. And this was a great example of someone asking a really good question. I need to underline that. This isn't a criticism of the question at all. It's actually a really good one. I left a comment on there and I thought, actually, I can perhaps talk a bit about it. And this all related to the Furka. So the Furka was essentially a long pole with another shorter pole going horizontally across the top. And from that, Roman legionaries would hang or attach various items. So, their food bags, all sorts of things. And they'd have that going over their shoulder and then walk along with it. And it was a way of them carrying that equipment and those items. And the question was a really good one. So really, did they do that? That doesn't look very ergonomic. And why not backpacks? And that's a really good question. And one of the reasons I'm on this platform, because I love getting questions like that or being able to jump on anyone else's questions and try and answer them. Anyway, I left a comment, but I thought I could probably add a bit more. So let's consider the practicalities involved here. One of the things that the Romans placed a great onus on with their armies was them being self-sustainable. That is to say, you can move a group of a couple of thousand men into a place and you don't have to rely overly on supply lines. You're not heavily reliant on them, because it's something that Rome really got to grips with, was the fact that the more you rely on supply lines, the more vulnerable you are. You've got to be able to be self-sustaining. And you can see that in a number of different ways they approach even recruitment in the army. So, for example, if you're a smith, a carpenter, a builder, if you had an extra skill, you got perks for being a legionary. You might not do the really naff stuff, cleaning toilets, and perhaps you don't have to go and patrol them as much, because they'd want you to use your skills. If it meant that perhaps you're a carpenter, right, we need to build something, you can stay behind and do that. If you're a smith, well, we've got lots of stuff that you can repair, you can do that. The whole point being is that any army was self-sustaining. It didn't require a great deal of anything else around it. Obviously it did, but the more you can mitigate that, the better. And I think this is where the Furka comes into it. Because if you think about it, if you have a backpack for every single individual for their gear to go in, first of all, it's a pretty big backpack. And we're going to get around the ergonomics, because you think about it, you're making this probably from leather. That's not the best. I mean, it might be nice, but if you look at modern backpacks, they're made of sort of light fabrics and very strong materials. So if you've all of a sudden, you've got all these leather backpacks, then you've got to have one for each soldier. You've also then got to have replacements. That's a whole bunch of stuff there. Think of all that leather. So you've got to have tanners. If you've got to have tanners, you've got to find people who can work the leather, repair it, and everything else. You think of all the supply chain just on that, to issue that to all the men, versus 2 sticks. There we go. That's all you need. If your Furka breaks down, if it cracks or breaks or someone treads on it or you lose it or it sets on fire or a wolf steals it, just ask Livy, this sort of thing used to happen, then you can find another 2 sticks. That's all you need to replace it. So in terms of practicalities, it's far easier to use that than, say, a rucksack or backpack, even if you could find one that would actually work. Because again, I'm not familiar enough with how a leather one would work when you had to have all those items. And another thing is practicality. I can put that down. If all of a sudden something kicks off, I've got to take my backpack off, and you've got hundreds of men all trying to get their backpacks off, because after all, you've got to move out and you've got to form up, versus, right, that just gets dropped. All I need to do is stick goes on the floor. That's it. I can engage, or I can get ready to assemble and engage, do whatever I need to do. So in terms of a response, it's far easier. So yes, again, this is a really good question. And I like people asking these questions, and I like seeing them, and it was asked really well, and it made a lot of sense. And it helps us understand when we have these sorts of questions, why they didn't use it, and why, even if they had the option, would they? But anyway, keep coming with those questions on everyone else's channels, and I'll try and jump on other people's stuff and and answer. But no, seriously. Anyway, thanks again to Variata for that. And thanks again for the person who asked that question, because I should say again, it was a really, really good question.